We all have something to share. No share with Dr. Dave.
All righty. Hello, everyone out there. I am just checking in as we get ready to go live. And we are live. I said, hello and welcome to the Knowledge Share with Dr. Dave podcast. I am Dr. Dave Cornelius, affectionately called Dr. Dave, and I'm your host. And the reason why we're kicking off this podcast series called Guiding Lean Portfolio Management, LPM with Generative Leadership, is that as I was thinking about, what should I do next for a series? So, I just recently completed an engagement with a client, and they do about $5 billion, annually. And I was working with a couple other coaches, and we implemented the Scale Agile framework, SAFe, Lean Portfolio Management, LPM. And we did this globally. And so that kind of like prompted, the idea that, that would be a great topic to talk about, Lean Portfolio Management. But I was also excited to think about the series in the context of the generative adaptive practice that I put together to talk about generative leadership, and said, well, hey, how does this really work together? How can we make this happen? And so this is the conversation that we're going to have today. Just really talking about these different practices and how well they work together as we go forward in our conversation. So there is this thing that I call the generative adaptive practice, and it's very human-centric in nature. And the whole goal of it is to really deliver value, make sure that we're delivering value to, throughout the organization and for its different members. And it has, 8 different tenets. And the first one is the abundance mindset. And so what we're trying to do is, like, leaders who have this abundance mindset, they believe that everyone has the potential to grow and succeed. And then the second part of that is that we have focused on we. We stands for willing and enabled, where we have people who are willing to lean in, do the work, bring some great value to the organization. But the leadership also helps to co-create this environment where they feel everyone is valued and empowered to contribute. The third practice, or third tenet, we said we trust you to achieve our goals. And so as we're thinking about how do we build trust, they believe people are more. They build trust with their teams and encourage them to take ownership of their work. The fourth tenet is win and lose as a team. And so basically the whole idea is that it's okay. Failure is one thing that we have to deal with and adjust to. And so we said, let's leverage failure as an opportunity to find new ways to learn and grow. So this is the leadership as we're walking into this new way of leading in the future of work, and even in the present times of work with, 5 different generations that are in our workplace today. This is a great opportunity. And then number 5, we talk about partner and have conversations to learn more. When we talk about gap leaders, they help develop great strategies by fostering dialogue and learning from their teams. But it's also connecting with their peers and also their partners who may be outside of the organization, as we're trying to build this ecosystem where everyone is contributing. And number 6, we say run the experiment and evaluate the hypothesis. Because one of the beauty of when we start to talk about lean portfolio management, we're going to discuss, the ability of people to hypothesize about what's possible. And I know oftentimes many people, they have this Dunning-Kruger, they're suffering from the Dunning-Kruger effect, that they're so positive about what's going to happen and it's going to work very well. We're going to make $10 million. Well, everyone in the enterprise struggles with this. So leaders, they're not afraid to experiment and take risk in this process in terms of learning. And number 7 is we talk about what did we learn from failure to grow. And so gap leaders, they want to talk about their team's ability to find areas for improvement, right? They believe failure is an opportunity to learn and grow. They create this wonderful culture where people feel safe admitting their mistakes, and it's okay. It's okay. And the final one that I love the most is fun and joy. Generative leaders who practice this tenet, they believe people are more productive and engaged when having fun and working in the organization. So those are the 8 tenets of we're going to use to have this discussion about lean portfolio management and how leaders could use these tenets to guide the LPM implementation as part of the discussion. Now, you may ask, well, what is lean portfolio management? Or what is lean portfolio in the first place? Why do I care about this? Why is this important to me? Well, in a larger organization, I would even say small organization, our goal is really to align strategy to execution and really deliver the highest value for customers and the organization, right? And so LPM is actually a set of practices that allows leaders and teams and partners and as well as their peers in the organization to maximize investments in products and services. They're trying to ensure opportunities are maximized and explore different scenarios as they come up. As we talk about LPM, again, this is the Scale Agile Framework, safe version of lean portfolio management. So in our conversation, we're going to lean into the gap practices and generative leadership role guiding the LPM adoption roadmap. That's some of the conversation we're going to have today. And so when you look at a portfolio itself, right, we're talking about a set of investments. And so we may have some prioritized budgets. You're going to have lots of ideas of how to come up with a digital solution to solve some of the problems that the organization or some of their priorities. We have prioritized investments, and there's learnings. There are things that we're going to learn as we go through this journey and in this process. So, one of the things that, what are some of the things that as we have different types of initiatives that are guided by LPM. So one of them is obviously business solutions, right? These are all the digital apps that we use to increase business capabilities that require leadership oversight, right? So we have that there. It also may be a part of infrastructure where we may be changing to use one of the cloud solutions like Azure and Google or AWS, or maybe another one, IBM. Even you may have architectural designs or a runway, right, to really help to guide the development of some of the business solution. You may be looking into compliance, right? So we may have SOX, ISO 9001, SEC, and more that we're concerned about that we have to comply to, right? Really important stuff. And so even explorations, people call proof of concept, MVPs, right? This is research and prototyping to better understand customer needs. So this is really important stuff that we think about when we're doing LPM and all of the different works that we will put together. So when we think about the benefits of LPM, well, why do we care? Why do we want to bring this change in and this new way of working into the organization? Well, we're talking about improving strategic initiatives, time to market. Can we get this thing to market faster? Can we accelerate decision making? And so especially if you're looking at large investments into different solution that's going to really help to differentiate the organization, this is really super important to be able to accelerate those decision making, as opposed to being in a space where you're having lots of friction and conversations about how to and what is the most important thing, and even how to approach it. So this also helps to reduce that friction between the different leadership and element and people in the organization, right? So LPM is just one of those wonderful tools that we may use to help us get there. And we know to do LPM, oftentimes, leaders, they may face like several challenges when adopting LPM itself and lean portfolio management. And they may find the whole concept and the approach that, oh, wow, I'm feeling super overwhelmed, and find the process super complicated. And so that's why you have consultants like myself and others who partner with these leaders and help guide them through this practice, but also bringing a leadership guide and leadership mindset in the process. Oftentimes they fear about losing control. I don't want to lose control. They want to have their own decision rights and really maintain those. So that's another critical element that we have to be mindful of and be concerned with. Sometimes you may have resistance from what we call value stream teams or value streams themselves. And they may not align with what LPM is, and they just want to go off and do their stuff. But it's really important for us to use those gap practices to help the teams realize that this is a value to the organization. And so that's some of the benefits and some of the challenges the leaders will experience as they're trying to implement LPM itself. One of the key things when I think about generative leadership itself, it's like, hey, the generative leadership itself has this context where you have head, heart, hands, and habits. And when we're thinking about head, what we're thinking about is strategy and innovation, things that's really super important. We may think about, the heart, that we're open to being people positive. And the third is like hands, and where we're co-creating an environment for teams to thrive. And what we're really looking at is also just habits, right? So generative leaders, not only do they have the generative adaptive practice and to use those tenets as a guide, but we're also bringing in, the human-centric aspect of leadership to help to effectively guide their organization through, this complexity of LPM adoption. This is a holistic approach, and it helps us to align all of the LPM practices with the human elements, really fostering a thriving, adaptive, and aligned organization in the process, right? I mean, this is super important stuff that we hang on to as we're trying to make the shift and change in the organization. Now, there are a lot more stuff. So, but if we start to think about how do we bring these human-centric elements of the head, heart, hands, and habits, and we start to connect them in with our generative adaptive practice, we could think of head itself as applying to abundance mindset. And also, what did we learn from failure to grow? Strategy and innovation. We think of heart, open to being people positive. So the gap practices we'll look at is focus on we, willing and enabled. We trust you to achieve our goals, and partner and have conversations to learn more. That's where the heart, sits. And that's where we'll use those different gap tenets to help guide the LPM adoption. And then we have hands, right, where we're co-creating an environment for teams to thrive. And the gap tenets that we look at is like, hey, let's run the experiment and evaluate the hypothesis. We want to win and lose as a team. And then we apply fun and joy. But also, when we look at habits, right? Habits, which we're trying to influence behaviors for some level of consistency. There's a lot of the different gap tenets that apply. So we would use focus on we, willing and enabled. We trust you to achieve our goals. And then we partner and have conversations to learn more. We run the experiment and evaluate the hypothesis, win and lose as a team, and then fun and joy, right? So those are the different tenets that we may look at that we're going to apply when we're bringing these human-centric aspects of things. When we're going through this, especially a lot of organization that uses LPM, we're thinking about enterprise strategies. And And I like to break them into two different categories. One of them is, hey, run the business. We want to run the business. And so running the business, is just all of the stuff that you do to keep the lights on, all the different work. But then the second aspect of this is to grow the business, the investments that you need to really become, the leader in your organization, a leader in your space, in your market space, but even to retain that market space is super important. And so as I start to think about different scenarios, so one of the ideas that we may have as a run the business, as an enterprise strategy, where the leadership come together and said, hey, we need to expand, our market share, among environmentally conscious Gen Y, Gen Z consumers by 5% within the next 2 years. That would be a strategy that would be put forth that someone may want to, go after and increase their market share in that space, knowing that the baby boomers at some point we're probably not going to spend as much as the next generation, but also it's looking at growing the business, right? And AI is a hot topic right now. And so one of the strategies that we may put in place is to add AI to fuel, the entrepreneurial capabilities by 2025, right? So that's kind of like the context. I have a poll that I'm going to drop out here in the chat, and hopefully you will, tap in and take this poll as I post this out, to our conversation. Hopefully, I would hear from you as we're doing this as we're having these different, topics in this conversation. So yeah, so go ahead if you get a chance. Go ahead and take the poll, see if you can get some stuff from it. And I'll be totally stoked if you take the poll. I think I'm trying to get up to about 30, and I think I'm halfway there. So if you could just tap in and take this poll, I'd be totally stoked about that. Okay. So let's keep moving forward, and let's start to talk about, how do we really implement this LPM adoption roadmap? And this roadmap comes from the Scale Agile framework from SAFe, right? We have, 6 different steps that we care about. The first one, what we think about is like, how do we align? And so what we're trying to do is make sure all of the leadership and stakeholders, align on the fact that there's a need to do LPM in the first place. And they believe that there's some value that will come from using lean portfolio management as a tool and a practice. The second one is organize, where we want to orient the portfolio around the flow of value. One of the key things that a lot of organization, especially digital product-based organization, are talking about is value streams. And so value streams are nothing more than a body of different individuals who are working together to provide a specific value end to end, from the time the customer makes a request to the time you deliver it. So this organized around value is the idea that we're going to have some value stream and art identification workshop, trying to figure it out. Who are all the people who are involved? What are all the systems? What are all the steps from the time there's a request until you get to the end? But also strategize. We need to establish what is the vision for a portfolio. They have the whole concept of strategic themes, which is nothing more than a representation of the enterprise strategies like I did before, in terms of, hey, let's use AI as to add AI to fuel our entrepreneurial capabilities by 2025 is one of the strategies that you may have. And we want to figure out, how do we bring this to the organization and make sure that it is the right idea that we're implementing. And just come to the reality that we maybe just be hypothesizing about this, and we would need to go through and take small incremental bets, small bets. Do small increments, get some validated learning. So that's also part of the strategy as we're putting this together. And then there's some budgeting guardrails that we'll put in place to make sure that there's enough funds at the right time for the right people to deliver value. The fourth step is about execute, right? And so when we're executing, this is really making sure that we're going through the different portfolio events. And one of the events is a portfolio sync, which you bring all of the people who have concerns or interest in a specific body of work, which we call epics. And they may have some different conversation that we would like to have, they would like to have, so that we can look at progress from the time there's an idea in the funnel all the way until we're delivering value to the customers. There's govern, where we're worried about more of how do we worried about contracting, compliance, financial practices. Also, even how do we measure and put these different tools in place for measuring the progress of the portfolio itself and the items within the portfolio, all of the different epics that we want to look at. And then finally is measure and grow, which is number 6, where we're really more focused on how is the portfolio progressing, how is it maturing, how is it running its events, how are the artifacts being created and used. So one of the good things about this LPM adoption roadmap and just using the lean agile mindset, we could take what we call a vertical slice approach, right? That we could take certain aspects of each one of these steps and deliver them an increment at a time, right? One piece of value at a time to get learning from it. You don't have to just do a line and organize and strategize. You could take a slice of each of these 6 steps and bring that and get some validated learning from that. So this is another way for us to think through and think about how we could do this LPM adoption roadmap. So what I've done is we're just going to do what I think is, this is more of an introduction to what the whole concepts are. And then in future episodes that's coming up, we'll go deeper with different conversations of having other experts partnering with me as we walk through each of these different steps as well in terms of the LPM roadmap adoption. So when we look at a line, the very first one, right? And so there are many things that we need to get done in this align step, right? And so the very first one that we're trying to do is hey, executives and leadership team, can we get you guys to buy into this concept? And so we may do a dog and pony show and show them exactly the benefits of LPM and what's involved with it. We help them to come up with definitions about portfolios. We may start to put together the LPM team itself, the people who are going to run the port operations, the individuals who are going to bring some of the artifacts, which we use. One of them is called the epic hypothesis statement, which it's kind of appropriate because we're just hypothesizing about an idea that's going to bring benefits and value to the organization. So, this epic owner role, kind of takes care of that and helps to create the artifact and have other collaborations with different people in the organization. We may set up some kickoff dates as part of this aligned conversation. Put a plan together of how we're going to succeed of getting through the 6 adoption steps, how much of the portfolio, because if, for simple organizations where you may only have a single portfolio, maybe you may be able to crunch through this. But when you go through bigger enterprises where they have many portfolios, and on top of that, you have an enterprise portfolio that deals with all of the stuff that goes across portfolios, you need to have a plan for doing that. right? And so it's good to lay out what that kind of looks like. There's also trying to anticipate concerns and impediments as we're going through this conversation. And LPM, it's a change initiative for the organization. So we need to have some level of change management that's involved in the process, to make sure that this change is understood, people understand the benefits. And we love Cotter's 8. We try to build synergies between different individuals who may want to be a part of this team, right? And we may spin up some community of practices, but all of those steps, we don't have to do them all at once. We do a little bit at a time, increment, a slice of value, an increment of value that we could start to evaluate and learn. And so when all of those things require, a leader that has an abundance mindset. And the two human-centric aspects that we want to look at is the head, that we have strategy and some innovation going into this. And then we're open, we want the heart. We want to be open to being people positive. One of the other activities that I like to do is using the empathy map canvas. This is a design thinking tool that I use, often for having different conversations. And so, one of the very first thing that you start off with, is up here at number one is, who are we empathizing with, right? So we try to establish some focus to describe the person or the persona. Who are we empathizing with? As part of number two, what do they need to do? We're trying to figure out what is their desired outcome. And this is just, this whole interaction with empathy map canvas is a conversation that we're having with the leadership team. We're having with different members of the organization, different partners. And so we're having this dialogue and capturing this information so we can get better insights into their needs. This is, if I was designing a product, this would be one of the tools that I would use to go out and have conversations with different people who may be interested in this product or different parts of the organization. And then when we walk through 3, 4, 5, and 6, so what we're really looking at is we're trying to capture the outside world. What do they see as number 3? What are some of the daily experiences that they're observing? We said, what do they say, right? Sometimes we're looking at the tone used to describe situation and experiences, and what did they do as number 5, right? And we're looking at demonstrated behaviors, the way he, she, they show up in the organization. What do they hear? What are people saying about their products? What did they read in social media? What about experts in their field? What are we getting from, HBR, like the Harvard Business Review, or MIT Sloan, or some of those other areas, Forrester and Gartner, which are experts in their field? And then number 7 on here is like, what do they think and feel? And this is where we try to explore the mind at the best that we can. And so we're talking about their pains, their worry, their fear, their anxieties, and also about their gains. What's possible for them to consider as a benefit for leaning in to doing lean portfolio management as an opportunity. So when we step into the next step, which is LPM adoption, to organize, this is where we're looking at how we build out value streams to support the delivery of a specific solution in the organization. And so, the different activities that's needed, the main activity that's needed here is really the value stream and art identification workshop. And we're trying to look at the current flow within the organization from the time there's a request until that value is delivered. We kind of map out those steps. We map out the different systems. We map out the different organizations, the different partners who are involved in the value stream itself. We may also try to even schedule some LPM events here in the Port Sync or a strategic portfolio review. And as a leader, one of the tenets that we want to lean into is that let's focus on the willing and enabled, right? People who are like totally into going on this journey with you, going in this new learning, and they're enabled because we give them the skills, we give them training, right? We build community of practices so that they could be able to be successful in this process. And the two human-centric aspect that shows up, in this LPM adoption step of organize is heart, to be open to being people positive, and habits, influence behaviors for consistency. As people get into the habit of going, hey, it's cool for us to have a value stream, for us to work independently, to be decentralized, to be able to deliver value for the enterprise itself. The next step is strategize. And in the strategize, step, what we're really trying to do is, how do we take these big ideas that the leadership comes up with when they go to their annual retreat and have these conversations about their strategies? How do we start to represent them as strategic themes, right? And so this gives us an opportunity to introduce this whole concept of OKRs, which we call objective and key results, where we look at what is the objective itself that we're trying to achieve, and what are the key results? How do we know we're successful? And so those are the key results that we may have per objective. How do we know we're successful? And normally you want about 2 to 5 of those key results for each one of the objective itself. This is really important. This also in this step, we start to think about the portfolio vision. We start to identify epics to realize the vision, and we may start to explore the budgets and guardrails at this point in time. So 3 very important human-centric aspects that's important is the head, heart, and habits. And the tenet that we want to apply, the GAP tenets itself, is we trust you to achieve our goals, because there has to be some trust to be able to take a big rock like a strategy and break that down into a series of strategic themes and have a vision of how we're going to achieve that strategy, throughout some period of time. Really, really good stuff to consider. The next step that we look at is execute. And so this is where we're trying to look at the portfolio Kanban. And like I said, as we come back to other episodes to lean into each one of these steps, we would provide examples of what a portfolio Kanban looks like. And are we facilitating those LPM events, which is, are we progressing the items that's on the portfolio Kanban from the funnel until it's done? Are we looking at participatory budgeting, which is another major event? And if you think about where you live and the local bodies who really run your city, they have some events that's participatory budget, where they're all working together to figure out what's the highest item that we should give money to be successful. So as part of the execute stage, right, there are the different events like the Port Sync, and they have a strategic portfolio review to evaluate how well is our portfolio doing, right? Because we're measuring, we're looking at KPIs, we're looking at objective and key results as different tools to measure how well are we doing through this process. We may also, stand up something like a value management office. Used to be a PMO, now we call it a value management office. We may also maybe set up a lean agile center of excellence, another place where we start to build practices and habits, right? So we have hands who are involved, we're co-creating environment for teams to thrive, but also we have habits, right? Where we're looking to influence behaviors to have some level of consistency. One of the things that I like to think about that the leaders are focused on in terms of the GAP tenets, we're talking about win and lose as a team. Right, so one team, one dream. We're winning and losing as a team at the LPM level, but also with the other team members, of people who are actually building the products or services for the organization. And we want to run the experiment and evaluate the hypothesis, right? Because you know, we tend to have this level of optimism, especially technology people and product people, this level of optimism that what we think about will naturally becomes a reality. Where if we start to think about it from the context that, hey man, this is we're hypothesizing about this, and hopefully we'll get some validated learning. So some of the principles of lean startup begins to seep in here, and not even begins to seep in. It's critical for us to get validated learning by going through building, learning, and measuring what's going on for the things that we're saying, like, hey, this is going to be great, right? So this is a very important step in execute. But the things that I like to introduce design thinking elements into the process, that as we get further into bringing these products to market, I think that there's two very important aspects that we need to think about, which is customer validation and customer traction. So this is part of the execute step as well as when we get further down where we're actually delivering value to our customers. Do we understand the customer pains and gains? And I like to go back to Clayton Christensen, his concept of jobs to be done, right? What jobs do they have to be done that we need to be concerned with? And then the customer traction is like they're buying or consuming our solution because it's a fit for use. We used to say fit for purpose, but fit for use, that is something really important. And so as we're leveraging these ideas that people are bringing to bring value to the organization, we go through these different triangles, these different journeys of saying that we need to understand the problem. And as part of understanding the problem is customer validation. Hey, by asking questions, by using the empathy map that I shared earlier, and start to define what that problem is, and then also design the right solution. So through that journey, through those learning, there's three major things that's happening, right? And so we want to know, is this desirable? Do people want this? Do they even want the solution that we're proposing? And I know from being many years in the technology space and building many different types of technology solutions across many different organizations and throughout the globe, that oftentimes we build a bunch of crap that people just don't want or they just don't use. It's just, matter of fact, I think it was Apple who did a research that says, people only use 20% of the stuff that we build. 80% of it is, lays there dormant, right? So that's waste. That's a total waste for our organization. But also, we look at feasibility. Is it feasible? Can we deliver this solution through a combination of building it, buying it, partnering, or even acquisitions, right, as part of the conversation? Is it viable, right? It's talking about, can we build and offer a solution that is cost effective, that we're not constantly doing these different overruns, these project overruns. And so it's something that we have to constantly pay attention to as we're going through, LPM as a whole, and we're looking at the total investments that we have in the organization. And finally, that as we keep these three things together of desirability, feasibility, and viability, is it sustainable? How long can we do this? And make sure that we're still, doing a great job and, making profits, right? And we're adding value for our people in the organization and for our partners, as well as our stakeholders and even our shareholders, right? And communities that our organization live in. So this is all part of the thinking of a generative leader, rebirth, new life, as some of the thoughts that we have going on. Now, for the next step, which is the LPM govern step, right? And so we're trying to look at the governance, and if we have partners external to our organization, so there are going to be some contracts that we have to be mindful of. There's going to be compliance aspects that we look at. If you're a publicly traded company, or you're in a biotech, or any of those regulated industries, there's going to be some compliance that you have to adapt to, and also some of the financial practices. Something like FASB 96, right? We're looking at APEX and CAPEX things that you have to consider. So in this government step, one of the key item that we're concerned with in terms of the tenant is partner and have conversations to learn more, because you're going to have lots of people that you have to partner with within the enterprise, and even external to the enterprise partners that we have to connect with. And so we need heart, hands, and habits, right? We got to be people positive. We have to co-create an environment for teams to thrive, and then we're talking about habits, about influencing behaviors, right? Another key aspect that happens that we're concerned about in the govern step is, this whole business technology management. Back in the day, we used to call it ABC, which is activity-based costing or service costing. All of the infrastructure, all of the stuff that we use, even in the cloud, how much does this cost? And how do we pay attention to that to make sure that, we're not having overrun and spending too much, right, for the solutions. We're getting the right bang for the buck, right, for our investments. So some of the key things that we care about also in this step is, make sure that we have a portfolio KPIs. Do we have business KPIs? Do we have value stream KPIs? Because we're very much concerned with flow, right? And flow is a very important thing, in terms of lead time. How long does it take for us to get something through our system and into the hands of our customers? And the final adoption step that we'll look at, as we go through in future episode that's coming, right? That we're trying to assess the portfolio, and there's a tool provided by the Scale Agile Framework, or SAFe, that we use to assess the portfolio itself and see how it's growing. And I'm also just looking at some of our KPIs and see how we're doing, right? And so as a generative leader using the generative adaptive practice, we're asking these questions. What did we learn from failure to grow? And are we having fun? Is there joy in the work that we're doing? This is the mindset and the habits that we're trying to put in place. So as you're trying to guide LPM as a leader, that not only do we have LPM that's taking place, but we're saying, hey, let's use the generative adaptive practice and use the context of being a generative leader in the organization, so that there are successes. And this is a huge change for many people in the way they work, and there's lots of pain that people experience as they go through this change. So we want the leadership at different levels to be able to make this as painless as possible, to make it a great experience. And by having these tenets and these different human-centric elements, that's possible. So what's next, right? In future episodes for this series, we're going to have people who are going to come in, and I'm going to do interviews with different individuals, experts, and they'll share their experience in terms of some of the work that they have done and how they're being, successful in the journey. So, each one of those 6 adoption steps that we discussed earlier, from align to organize, to strategize, to execute, to govern, to measure and grow, there will be people who would come in and have great conversations, with me And so we'll have some collaboration taking place in future episodes. Um, we have a learning opportunity that's coming up. We'll be kicking off the Generative Leadership to Thrive cohort in Masterclass. You can just hit that QR code, and that would take you to a space so you can learn more. This is a great opportunity to learn about this approach to leadership, and it will definitely, add great value for your organization. So, as we end this context that I've been sharing about guiding lean portfolio management, LPM, with generative leadership, what we're really trying to do through sharing of this knowledge, sharing of this information, is looking at the different possibilities of how we're able to do this in a way that people are learning. People have the capacity to learn and grow. And so leaders, right? We know people are going to feel overwhelmed when we're trying to go through to this level of change, because oftentimes this is a big ordeal and that involves the leadership and at different levels in the organization, of getting through lean portfolio management. That this is a gradual process, and we have to have some patience. You got to build some trust in the process. We shouldn't try to do this as a sudden upheaval. Treat LPM as a journey toward its collective growth and the potential for the organization. So I'm saying take small but significant steps toward this change. We could build a great culture of trust and collaboration within the teams, and also achieve success with the LPM implementation. Look, if you're a leader feeling daunted by the complexities of LPM, it's okay. Every time I've done this, we have that experience of people going, oh, wow, this is a lot. If you're worried about the implementation or losing control, look, this is a process about evolution, not revolution. So take it slow, build trust, and just move forward with small, significant steps. Look, we need to recognize the collective potential within the organization and use it to our advantage. And I'm just saying, with patience and some persistence, we could successfully implement LPM and create a culture of collaboration and growth. It's not just about just achieving those goals, right? It's also, it's about creating this lasting change that benefits everyone. And we're making the right investments, we're making the right bets, we're making the right decisions in this journey. So look, I would say next time, I want you to join the Knowledge Share with Dr. Dave podcast as we explore abundance mindset from the generative adaptive practice, which I call GAP, and its pivotal role in aligning the organization to agree and align on the LPM journey. And so we will look at how these collaborative strategies build a robust lean portfolio management LPM practice to withstand all of the changes that's going to come your way. I would say, I look forward to just connecting with you. Look, the Knowledge Share with Dr. Dave podcast is also on Spotify, on Apple, on Audible, or wherever you get your podcast. We've been running this podcast now for 10 years, and I'm totally stoked that we have listeners throughout the world who listen to this podcast, which is really amazing. I want you to check out my latest book called Generative Leadership to Thrive. It's looking at the whole context of what does it take to bring about change in the organization using this new leadership perspective. You could find these books that I have listed here on Amazon, but also you could go to drdaveduka.com, and Duka is Duka. So you could check that out. and see those books. And they're available in Audible and audio, Kindle, and print options. So, look, thank you for listening. And remember, the journey to excellence is ongoing, and every step taken requires an abundance mindset. It requires you to adapt being a generative leader, which helps you to step toward a thriving generative organization. With that, I just look forward to seeing you and at the Generative Leadership to Thrive cohort masterclass. I'll put that out there in the chat, and I hope you go ahead and take the opportunity to actually fill out my poll, trying to get to 30 people, 35 people. Share this with everyone that you run into, and with that, look forward to connecting for our next podcast. Be well.
Let's talk about talk. Let's go deep. We all have something to share. No share with Dr. Dave.